Okay, here we are with part 3 of building a home recording studio. Usually you won't have to be too concerned with the instruments. I'm a musician, composer, and the audio engineering part just happens to be an outcropping of those two disciplines. So you probably won't have to populate your studio with a lot of instruments. I have a few keyboards. There's a keyboard controller there. My backup Kurzweil in the control room. I have my main Kurzweil K2600. Now these instruments, like I say, won't necessarily be required if you're building a recording studio to record other musicians. But there are some things that you will need. So I'll try to go through the list without going into an extreme amount of detail here, and then we'll come back and spend some more time with each of the pieces of gear in later videos. First thing you're going to need is some microphones. There are so many different microphones on the market, and each one will perform a different task in the studio. If you're very, very fortunate, as I am, you'll have friends who are in the sound reinforcement industry or have studios of their own and have the really nice, expensive microphones, and they will like you enough to let you borrow them when you have projects that require really good microphones. What I did for my home studio was bought a variety of the inexpensive MXL microphones and some Shure 57s, which are the workhorse of the industry. Can't go wrong buying a Shure 57 for your first microphone. You're going to need cables, a lot of XLR cables to connect your microphones. These are some that I keep close at hand in the live room just to make it easy when we're doing a setup. I have another section of cables, which, by the way, are not to be thought of lightly. Cables in the studio are a major component. You'll end up with lots and lots and lots of cables. You'll notice there are some patch bay cables there. I did use patch bays in the studio at one point. I have a few down here. And I used that to patch gear into the audio chain. Microphones are going to require stands, so you need to get yourself some stands. There's a couple of mics I'm using to record saxophones. You can see I have a long boom on a short stand and a short heavy stand with a boom on it. That's how I can put a mic on the bell and on the side of the saxophone. Get better coverage that way. Stands, depending on what kind of music you're going to be recording, will determine how many and what type you need to get. If you're going to record drums, make sure you get a couple of boom mics that have tall stands and nice arms with really heavy basses, so you can get your overheads boomed out over the cymbals properly. Next thing you need to do is plug the microphones into either a control surface or a console. This is the SX1. This was the heart of my recording studio before I went to recording in the box, because this particular console is an all-in-one solution made by Tascam. It has 16 channels in with very nice digital to analog or analog to digital converters. It has a hard disk recorder built in. You can plug up an external monitor to make life easier for you when you're doing the editing. And I did use this for my editing, which turned out to be a bit cumbersome, and later I went to using a computer. But it has a very nice tactile motorized faders. You can program memory into it. There are several other things that you need to use in a studio that are all built into this. We'll get to those. It has a talkback mic for the live room. It has headphones, 2 headphone sends, but you can map the aux outs to give you an additional 4, so you can have a total of 6 headphone sends here. I have 16 channels running from the live room into the SX1. I do not use the hard disk recorder part of it anymore. It's basically used for the converters to get the analog to digital sound that I want, and I'm sending 16 channels of ADAT out from this to the computer. I have an additional 24 channel mixer here, another Tascam. I really like Tascam gear, and I'm only using 8 channels of this, giving me a total of 24 channels in from the live room to the consoles. Next thing you need is going to be your computer. I suggest that you build your own computer, unless you can afford to buy a Mac Pro. They're obviously the best. Everyone uses them who can afford them, but they're looking at around $3 grand. I'm building a new studio computer now. Just happens to have one busted open here. Here's a case for it, a couple of 1 terabyte data drives. I'm going to use a solid state hard drive, a solid state drive for the system, as it's a very fast and stable boot up. 250 gigabyte Samsung solid state drive, going with the X99 motherboard and the latest i7 multi-core. Not the latest, one step down on the latest i7 multi-core chip. You just can't keep up with the tech. I've discovered that in my existing computer, I use a very, very nice RME HD 9652 card for my interface to the computer. Now, it's not going to work in my next build, the one we just looked at, because it fits in a PCI slot, and the new architecture on the X99 boards only has PCIe slots. So I'll be moving up, if I can figure out how to finance it, to the PCIe version of the RME card, which is right about $1 grand right now. So I'm looking at alternatives for that. I also, for an interface to my computer, use a Focusrite. This is the Focusrite Pro 40, I believe. So you can see it here. It has 8 channels of ADAT. I use this primarily with my live rig, but in the studio I'm also using it to interface with the Mac Mini computer that's in my live rack, running main stage, and I have several instruments in there. VST instruments is going to be one of the things you want to add to your computer, but the first thing you need to get is the desktop audio workstation software that you want to use, or your DAW. I went from Logic, when it became Apple only, to Samplitude, and then from Samplitude I moved to Cubase, and I'm still using Cubase. The industry standard for your workstation is going to be Pro Tools, and nothing wrong with Pro Tools. I just have not been able to afford it, and I believe it likes to live on a Mac a lot better than it does on a PC, but I can't swear to that, as I don't have any personal experience with it. The more monitors you can hook up to your computer, the better, because you're going to end up with lots of stuff on the screen. So make sure you have good video capability in whatever computer you decide to use. I have an additional small 1-channel work surface. This is the CC121 made by Steinberg. It's designed to work with Cubase, and what it does is it acts like a channel strip with tactile controls for each of the virtual channels that are created in the software. So you can put your hands on a fader and move it. You can program some buttons to control any aspect of Cubase that you want. It's very handy. It has these EQ knobs right here, so you can, instead of rolling a mouse or trackball, which I prefer trackballs, you can put your hands on a knob and turn it, and there's just something about that works better for me. The output will be going to monitors. You probably need more than one pair of monitors, at least two. I suggest, now in this case I have a keyboard workstation over here, so I use these Event BAS 2020 powered monitors for when I'm working on a piece at the computer. And then when I get to doing a real serious mix on the console, I have the Dyne Audio M1s. I'll talk about each of these pieces of gear in more detail in future videos. Right now we're just trying to cover everything that goes into it. And then you're going to want a small set of inexpensive monitors, the Aratones for example. I don't have any here right now, to be able to test your mix on small inexpensive speakers, because most likely the people listening to your finished mix are not going to have a $5,000 set of monitors on the bridge of a console to listen to them. You're going to need tons of cables. You can see here this 16 channels is a snake going to a breakout box in the live room, and there's an additional 8 coming from the other test cam mixer. So in here in the live room you can see this breakout box with 16 XLR channels. Doesn't want to focus. And it also has 4 aux A, B, C, and D TRS connections that you can map to headphones, which I do. I have a Sweet 16 PRS amplifier. Thanks to Paul Smith and the guys down at PRS, they let me use this in the studio. So if a guitarist should come and need something to plug into, we have a nice little amp. Let's see, as far as outboard gear, I use some equalization in the room, and I also have a separate EQ for the live room monitors when I do playback in there. Probably not necessary, but I wanted it to sound really good everywhere. I use a Rosendahl NanoSync, which is a word clock, master clock, instead of using the ADAT sync or the internal sync from some of my digital devices. I find clocking it all to word clock from this piece of outboard gear is a better solution. It keeps everything locked up very tight. Also have a few different tape recorders. If you're going to be using the studio to do conversions, you better be ready to play whatever anybody can throw at you. There's an old DAT player. I have the Panasonic, that was the Panasonic DAT. Here's the Tascam DA78 HR 8-channel digital recorder that records the tape. This DTRS is really outdated. Also for outboard gear, I have a PowerPlay Pro, which gives me 4 more channels of headphone mix. If you can see that very good. I apologize for the focus. Not sure why it's not working as well as it should. And you're going to need headphones. I have several pairs of headphones here. They're different kinds, of course. You're going to want a hard-shelled headphone for use in the live room to keep the sound of the click track from coming through into the mics, and then some open back headphones for in the control room. There's some nice ones there. There's some nice Sennheisers, if I can find them, hanging around here somewhere that are good for drummers while they're getting the click. And also I have these Beyerdynamics that are very, very good. Nice hard shell, the DT770s. There you go. Highly recommended. Nice hard shell, very good sound isolation with these, and they sound great. I also recommend that you get a power conditioner. I have several of these Furman PL Pluses. You can see it there. Clean up the juice. A couple in this rack that distributes gear power. You should also get an uninterruptible power supply so that you don't blow up a take if there's a glitch in the power coming from the street. You're going to need some DIs to plug instruments directly into your board. I have a multi-director by Whirlwind that I use in my live rig. You can see that very good. But when I'm doing serious recording here, I borrow the radials from my friends who have them. Radial DIs are the best, of course. And I think that's everything you're going to need to get a studio going, except for all the stuff I forgot. You'll need some plugins for your software. I use Waves, a lot of Waves plugins, and I also use the Oddball plugin that you can find. There's thousands of them online. Some are free, some are not. As far as virtual instruments go, again, that's another whole video. We can go into which virtual instruments I use in studio, and I do plan to do that eventually. So get your studio going. Microphones, some cables, a console or control surface, your interface, which will convert the analog signals into digital to get them into your computer. You need your computer and some plugins and a DAW to work with in there, some recording software. I really like Cubase, an affordable alternative to Pro Tools. If you can afford Pro Tools in a Mac Pro, go for it. That's going to be the best you can do. With the market the way it is, there's a lot of things to choose from. You'll need monitors for the output. If they're not powered monitors, you'll need an amp to power the speakers. My Dynaudios are powered by a 1000-watt Carbon in the rack here, the DCM 1000. Thanks to the folks at Carbon for providing this amp to me. Years ago they were an endorser, and it's held up great. Okay, that's it. Come back for part 4. We'll start to look at some of this gear in a little more depth. Thanks for watching, and listen to music. It will make you better.